Welcome here to the FWA review, where I'm delighted to be joined by the Telegraph's deputy football correspondent Jeremy Wilson, who most recently won the Journalism Award for the Alzheimer's Society for your fantastic work on dementia and football. We're going to talk to you about that later, but how happy are you at the way that football has embraced your campaign and is going forward?
I'm happy that football has finally decided to take hold of this issue, head injuries of former footballers, the fact that so many former players seem to be suffering with dementia, and research is underway to see what kind of link there might be to playing football and dementia. So I'm really happy that that's finally happening. The only thing you have to say is it really has been it's been going on for 16 years since Jeff Astle died, and this campaign's been running for a very long time, and the football authorities have been incredibly slow to get hold of it, but progress is now happening at least.
We're going to pick that up at the end of this review, but we're going to go to the headlines. We're at Chelsea now, so the match about to kick off against West Brom. We're a little wary this could date quite quickly, but as you've put in your article this week, Chelsea could find losing their coach backfires. Why do you think this time it should be different?
Well, I think everybody always looks at Chelsea and thinks that it doesn't matter who the manager is. I think they've had 10 changes of managers, 14 trophies across 13 years. I think that was the statistics I looked up. So there's this theory, it doesn't really matter if that pressure and tension, it could be quite beneficial to the club really. But I think at the moment, the real reasons behind that is because I think Chelsea had two massive strengths in that time. One was they had a really unusual dressing room. I think John Terry, Frank Lampard, Didier Drogba, Petr Cech, even a few other big characters beyond those, but they're probably the four obvious ones. I don't think you get many football dressing rooms like that, and I think they were almost like Roman Abramovich's insurance policy when he got rid of a manager, and they could almost run the club, run the dressing room themselves to some extent, and you don't have that now. They're all gone, and it's a much quieter dressing room from what we understand. The second thing is obvious. It's just that early on Abramovich was financially so much more dominant across English football than he is now. I mean, Chelsea are not exactly paupers at the moment, but Manchester City have spent more money than them in the last since Sheikh Mansour's come in. Manchester United are spending more on wages than Chelsea. So I think in the past, when they were revolving managers, you had those two fallbacks of you had the most money and you also had an unusually strong dressing room. And I think without those two factors, I think the sort of relative importance of a manager grows. And so I think Conte, if you look at his track record in the last 5-10 years, it's up there with anybody, Guardiola, Mourinho, whoever you want to name. If you look at what he did at Juventus, and even with Italy, with a fairly average Italian
amazing what he did there.
Group. So I just think Conte is a very good manager, and they need to think very carefully if they feel the situation has become irretrievable.
Jonathan Northcroft as well, writing about the end of the Roman Empire. It seems there's a bit of a power shift. Is there a power shift here? Slayer, Stayer, has it gone? The North London derby, the shift to White Hart Lane / Wembley.
We've been talking about power shift for a long time, but I think it's undeniable because Tottenham finished above Arsenal last season and they're 7 points above Arsenal this season, so you can't really, I don't know, by the Premier League table is the best barometer of that. I think previously some of these talk, especially I suppose in the Harry Redknapp time when Gareth Bale was around, and even early on in Pochettino's years, I think it was a bit premature that people talked about a power shift. I don't think it's necessarily permanent. I think Tottenham have sort of nosed ahead. I don't think it's a huge change, and I don't think it's certain to continue, because I think it's hard for Tottenham with their wage structure to. This could be the absolute peak for Tottenham, because it's going to be hard to keep all those players together.
It's a knife edge, isn't it?
So, and Arsenal do have those advantages financially, and also you've got to say, if you looked at what Tottenham have done since Pochettino's came in the last 3-4 years, you'd still probably just about take what Arsenal have done in that same time period with 2 FA Cups. A third just before I think Pochettino came in. I think they're I think Wenger might be 2-1 it's 2-1 to Pochettino 2-1 to Wenger in league finishes. So it's probably be 2-2 after this. So it's a lot closer than people think, but suppose you have to accept in the last year,
Yeah.
with the last season and now where the table is now, you have to say that there is a shift. It's clear.
Trophies withstanding, which is always the Arsenal fans' point. What a remarkable array of firepower we have at the moment in the Premier League. The back pages, obviously, this Monday for some Aguero, but then also the talk of Kevin De Bruyne and whether he could be up for the Ballon d'Or. And as we're talking at Chelsea, also Mo Salah departed from Chelsea, also in the running, and Harry Kane for the FWA Awards, Footballer of the Year. De Bruyne is going to be very happy he's in a Premier League title-winning team, by the looks of it.
Yeah, it's a really hard choice because, I mean, Harry Kane's had a fantastic year. I think it's hard not to go for a Manchester City player just because they're so clearly the dominant team, and it would seem odd in a year like this where we've probably got one of the best teams in Premier League history. Maybe they'll go on to get a record points tally. I think they're on course to do that, to sort of give it to say a player from another team. I think Salah does deserve a real mention though, because I'll be completely honest, I obviously didn't follow him that closely after he left Chelsea, and he didn't get many chances here, and I just didn't. When he moved to Liverpool, you sort of thought they were buying a sort of slightly a good player, but not an absolute elite, not someone in the Hazard, Kane, De Bruyne, Sanchez type bracket, and he is right up there. He's up there with De Bruyne and Harry Kane this year.
I wonder if Mourinho should have stuck with his instincts, because when he played for Basel and scored against them, he's like, I'm going to get him. And he should have maybe just kept, whether he politically could have done, maybe that's the question. Pep's Red Riot Act, is he trying to change football? Should he? And Jose Mourinho going on to say, I'm the silent one, I'm the quiet one, I'm the good one, very much saying along the lines of, it happens to my players too. And I think this is fair call, because we saw McTominay hacked down. I also saw their new signing hacked down at Yeovil as well. So Man United players are coming in for it. Alexis
they were
Sanchez
on the end of a horrendous one against Huddersfield, Manchester United. Actually, going back to the head injuries one, that made me really wince, to be honest, when I saw that. And that is, I think, the type of incident that you would hope that, I know that there's this re-refereeing of incidents, but for that to go relatively unpunished, I think you've got to really look quite closely at finding a way to deal with something like that, because that was dangerous. Mourinho, I suppose it's quite nice to see. Seems to have got his sense of humour back a little bit the last week, because he's been pretty grumpy for a few years now, really. And I think so. A few sort of barbs about his sort of I'm the sort of well-behaved person on the touchline as well. I think what Guardiola's saying is really interesting, because tackling's obviously part of football, and it's an art in itself. But I do think, as a sort of general point, and this is not about how many bad challenges City have got or how many bad challenges another team have got, I do think having someone to come in and sort of challenge that macho English football, we're physical, we don't need a winter break, we're like, this is the sort of tough league. I don't think that sort of culture, and I think you can sort of smell that all the way through English football, not just in the Premier League, right, go as far down as you want. And I don't think that's been massive. I don't think that's been a problem for us. And if you look at the results on the international stage, I think that's part of the problem. So I think having someone like Guardiola, who everyone will listen to, coming in and sort of talking about that is actually quite helpful and could benefit English football. I think Wenger tried to do it 5 or 10 years ago, but Wenger picked the wrong moment, because he did it just as Arsenal was starting to lose, and everyone was just like, Wenger's whinging. Whereas Guardiola, he's winning with football as it is, in
16-point buffer.
so no one can say, oh, you want to change it so that you can win. He's already winning as it is. So I think people will listen to him more than perhaps they did when Wenger was raising it.
Let's look to the shock result. All the back pages last week were Rafa Benitez, Newcastle, hanging by a thread, and then this result. Does it say more about Newcastle or more about Manchester United? Fantastic goalkeeping debut.
Yeah, I think it's just quite a lot about the Premier League as well. These sort of results, they do come up quite... I mean, the top six have been more dominant this year than recently, but still, from bottom to top, there's a strength in depth that makes every game pretty unpredictable. I think Manchester United have been pretty consistent this season. They've been very consistent this season. Obviously not quite at the level of Manchester City, and I think they've got a real battle with Liverpool and Chelsea Liverpool and Tottenham in particular for second, maybe not so much Chelsea. So I think credit to Newcastle and Benitez and what he's done. I mean, he's a wily in terms of the way he gets fans on side, but you've got to respect what he's done at Newcastle. I think to stay the season when they're in the Championship as well. There's not many coaches with his sort of CV would do that, and you've got to give him quite a lot of respect for that. I think that was really impressive that he went down and then he came back up.
There is this ridiculously close gap, I think 2 points between 13th to the relegation spots. Do you ultimately think Rafa could stay with Newcastle if they get relegated again?
I think he could. I think it's possible. I think Rafa, obviously any manager's going to look at what options are out there, and if he gets a really good offer, it will be hard for him to go back down to the Championship. But he always strikes me as someone who he seemed quite an emotional sort of person. You can tell that the bond he still has with Liverpool fans means a lot to him, and he's obviously got something similar with Newcastle fans. And I think he's a manager that does care about the supporters and does want to be wanted. So I think that pull for him could keep him interested even if Newcastle went down. But equally as well, it will depend what else is on the table, I'm sure. I don't suppose it's purely going to be that, but I wouldn't rule it out.
A lot of talk this week about midfielders, about the pressure on midfielders and in their position. It almost seemed quite an upsetting scene as Pogba was hoiked and went and sat on the bench. He's not playing in the position he ideally would play in, but really struggling and has so much focus of attention on him. Too much attention for one player in one team.
Possibly there is. I mean, it probably irritates Mourinho a little bit because he's so much about the team and not the requirements he has of the sort of greater good in the decisions he makes, and it's not about one individual. I think the interesting thing for me with Pogba is this position that they play him in, because I think he's better further forward, and I think that Mourinho generally wants two midfielders who are fairly cautious, who will hold their positions, and Pogba's obviously not like that, and so there's a bit of an issue there. I think it's similar when you watch Aaron Ramsey play as well. He wants to fly all around the pitch, and sometimes it's sensational and it comes off, and sometimes it really disrupts the sort of discipline of the team shape that the manager wants, and I don't think Mourinho in particular won't like that. I think it's a bit of an issue for those type of box-to-box players anyway in football, because I think finding where they fit, I think a lot of teams want two fairly disciplined midfielders, and then they've got their creative players further forward, and you really have to sometimes alter the whole system to get a Pogba regularly in a team, and as I say, I think it's similar with Ramsey at Arsenal as well.
You've done some fantastic work on dementia. A very upsetting and very brave interview. Kieran Dyer talking to Ollie Holt about abuse, and we've talked about footballers coming up and being brave and talking about things, but how impressive have you been? How impressed have you been by that article and his bravery to come forward? Because it's going to help so many other people of his age or anyone in that position.
I think it will greatly, because it will. I think that message, and I think that came out when the abuse within football became really known a year or so ago, just over a year ago, and I think that message that you've not done anything wrong, you're not alone, that there's other people who have gone through something similar has been proven to be really powerful and a great source of strength. And that was what encouraged so many more other people to come forward. I know it's a different case, but I think people who are willing to, obviously it's people's own individual decision how they handle it, but I think people speaking out about these things clearly does help other people that have gone through something similar, and you just hope that it's also helped Kieran Dyer as well to get this out there, and that he can get himself into a better place than it obviously has affected him during his career. And
it explains so much about the struggles he went through and the demons he's been carrying, and the excellent work of Danny Taylor with so many footballers in the past. Help any kid that might be feeling they're hiding something to come forward.
Yeah, you just
extraordinarily moving.
and you hope that as well. I think the other big thing is that you hope that it will just more generally the coverage that this sort of issue has got, that it will ensure that people in positions of power listen when people come forward, because I think that's one of the big messages, the sense that people weren't always feeling that they would be listened to or that they would be believed. And I think it's not just for the footballers that have been, or any person that's been affected, but it's also for the people in positions of responsibility, or the person that they might confide in, to really understand the importance really of listening to people and believing people when they come forward with something like this.
Which links us back to what I said we pick up at the end of this review, and what you want to see changing from your excellent work on dementia and Alzheimer's, and the work that the PFA is doing. Have they done enough? Are they doing enough? And do they need to invest more, in your view?
I think they need to do a lot more. I think it's great that they and the FA have funded the research that's begun into this issue, but there is a lot of former footballers, hundreds of them, who are suffering at the moment, and a lot of anecdotes from them are that they're not being supported, they're not really being helped within football, and I think the PFA really need to step up and address this, because these are some of them are former heroes in football, and with the money that's in football, Gordon Taylor's salary became public again today, and
2.2 million.
2.2 million, and I think the funding that the PFA has put into this area is 100,000, which is, as I say, it's good that they're doing the funding.
No,
but it's the contrast there, and I think the funding's great, the research is great, but I think there's a care issue as well, and I think the PFA could be doing. It's not about compensation. It's not about people wanting sort of payback for what might have happened and whether football was to blame for it, but it's about using football's enormous wealth and the PFA's enormous wealth. It gets a huge amount of money from the Premier League to put back and to look at whether different care structures could be put in place that are appropriate for the people that are suffering. And I don't think that's with the money that's in football, I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. So I think that's the big focus on the PFA, is what are they doing about the care side of it. It's great that they've done the research, but there's still people out there that are really struggling. I
imagine there'll be some articles coming from you further on that.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that care side of it is something that we'll really look at now, because it's great that, as I say, the research, and I think you have to. The person that's leading the search is a guy called Dr. Willie Stewart, who was the person that diagnosed CTE, which is basically it was a traumatic. It was in Jeff Astle that it was due to the trauma, head trauma. It wasn't a normal form of dementia. It was actually diagnosed that that's the case, and he's the guy that's leading the research, and he's been pretty critical of the authorities. So it's really good that they've got someone who's respected. Everybody has faith in him that he will be independent, that he will do that. But I think his research is going on. It's, as I say, it's that. I think that's what we'll be focusing more, is how are we helping these players that are really struggling. People are selling their homes. They're in really desperate straits, and Alzheimer's is something that affects everybody in society, yes. Families throughout society, and I think as a whole we need to look at how we're dealing with that.
And that is why we're celebrating football writing, because it does change people's lives, as well as bringing the colour to a match day like this. Jeremy, many congratulations on your award and for finding time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. No, thanks for having me.